Hello, my name is Beck, and today I'm going to be bringing you some thoughts on what I have recently been reading. This is kind of a reading wrap-up, but instead of doing it monthly, I just thought I'd bring you the 10 books I've recently read in kind of a cluster and see how we go from here. For me, it's just easier to do things in clusters on my channel, and then on my blog, I've got things monthly. So if you wanted to check out my blog, I always leave a link in the description down below. So the first two books I've got on this list are kind of not books, they're comics and a manga, but I read these back in Booktubeathon at the end of July, and that is The Walking Dead and Deadman Wonderland. The Walking Dead actually is getting darker and more gritty with each volume, and I'm really loving it. I think I gave this a 4.5 stars. Rick is just getting crazier, and Michonne is seen talking to herself, and you just don't know where these characters are going to go next. The pacing is really, really quick, and something is always happening, and I'm just really invested in what's going to happen next because you just can't predict it at all. I just wanted to point out though that the first volume has different art styles to the rest of the preceding volumes, and that can turn people off. I know that I got hugely interested in the first volume and I just kind of stuck with it the rest of the way. I found the art in the first volume a lot better, but I'm really liking this anyway, and I've managed to stick with it so far, so I can't wait to continue this series. I just wanted to also mention that The Walking Dead are very dark and messed up psychologically, as well as gory and a bit bloody, so if that's not really your thing, I'd probably avoid these just in case you get a bit overwhelmed, but I mean, it's fiction, so I kind of love it. Deadman Wonderland is a series that I've been reading recently. This is volume 5, but I've read 6 volumes so far. I don't think I'll be continuing, despite the premise of this really hooking me. It's about this guy named Gantar. He gets set up and is thrown into prison for the murder of his classmates, which obviously he didn't do. And in this prison, the inmates are pitted against each other to duel, and it's kind of a wonderland for people who visit, and they don't realise that the characters are subjected to horrifying psychological things, possibly dying, getting limbs removed if as a punishment. And the thing that kind of centres in this book is blood kinesis. Certain characters are able to fight and control certain things with their blood, and it manifests differently in each character. So Gantar is just becoming aware of his blood kinesis, and it's never happened before Deadman Wonderland, so he doesn't really know its origin. Despite the premise of this, where guests can come to this weird Wonderland theme park and watch the inmates battle, there was a lot of internal politics in the actual prison, and also you get this sense of urgency because every 3 days these characters have to eat this pill, and that's what keeps them alive because they've got these shock collars on that kind of distribute a poison into them, and this pill is like the antidote. So getting that pill combined with learning what this blood kinesis means, plus meeting all of these random side characters who are also urgent and desperate and wanting to fight. This is just a very convoluted manga. At least that's what I found. I just didn't get invested like I wanted to. There are a few key characters and I wish it kind of followed those instead of broadening the scope and following a whole bunch. At one point, I'm not going to spoil who, but there was a character death, and I thought it would be a lot more climactic than it actually was, but it happened in a few panels, and then the next chapter was just completely different. It wasn't like the character's recovering so much from the death. It does affect the main character quite significantly, and we do see him kind of go into a bit of a rut from it. But apart from that, I didn't really believe it. I wanted to be able to suspend my disbelief, but it kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, but what's actually happening? And things got alluded to by the characters that owned the prison, but we don't really get any concrete detail. I feel like that might come later. Maybe it comes in volume 7 that I haven't read, but I'm probably not going to continue this series. Maybe I'll try the anime. I think I gave this 3 stars or 3.5 stars. So it's not like a bad manga, but I just am not personally invested in it. And to buy each volume like I do is expensive. I could try the library, but I'm just not going to continue it for now. Next, I listened to an audiobook called Darion by Con Iggulden, and this guy actually blurbed the Trader's Blade series, the Greatcoat series, and I thus had really high expectations for this book. It's a very short adult fantasy, and the audiobook's about 10-ish hours long. So I got through this really, really quickly, and I think I need to just chill on my expectations because That's what kind of pipped me at the post for both Bloodsong and The Lies of Locke Lamora, and this one unfortunately was no different. It was a really good book and I really enjoyed it, but I thought I'd give it a 5 stars and I ended up giving it like a 3.5 to 4 stars. The synopsis for this one was a little bit vague as well, and I couldn't really find much online about people who had also read it or reviewed it and that type of thing, so I thought I'd just jump in, and I jumped in fairly blind. But we follow a bunch of different characters, which surprised me considering how short it is. The main character that starts off the book, I've actually forgotten his name, so it really shows how invested I was. Oops. The main character in this book is a father, and he's a farmer and also a hunter. So we jump into his perspective. He's in this town, and it's being described as he has this knack for being able to hunt things, and despite other families in this town going into the forest and coming back out with nothing consistently, he goes into the forest and comes out with something every single time. So he's kind of got this knack and understanding that you don't really know what it means, but then later on there's a plague in this village and he gets really, really desperate, and he goes into this, I guess, this tavern that's local, and a bar fight starts. And he's trying to play at cards. Someone accuses him of cheating because he can predict the cards with his knack. And all hell breaks loose from there. There's a huge brawl, and this guy with a gun points it at this character as he's about to leave the tavern. And it's a really cinematic moment. And this character looks down the barrel of the gun and steps aside just as the trigger gets pulled, so he knows exactly where the gun is going to shoot. I thought that was an awesome premise. This book is only partly from this character's perspective, and I just really wanted this whole book to be about him because he's so distraught and interesting. And we don't often, or at least I don't often, see books that are about fathers trying to protect their daughters and going to huge lengths to do that. And so that's why I found this character really interesting, but he just didn't really drive the story for me. He was something that was also happening at the time of the other characters discovering their knacks and going on this treasure hunt kind of thing. From the beginning, I thought this would be a lot more action-packed and a lot more, I guess, cinematic, judging by the setup of that first scene. And there was a lot of action going on, but because of the action and the different perspectives shifting constantly, I didn't really get as deep into the characters that I really wanted to. And because I didn't get deep into the characters like I wanted to, when certain tragic things happened closer to the end, I wasn't distraught like I thought I should be, and that kind of detracted a little bit from my rating because I wanted to feel more, I guess. It did intrigue me though, and the audiobook was really short, so it's a really quick read. So I would recommend it if you're looking for this dark kind of vague fantasy with a magic system that you don't really understand but that sparks at certain moments. Overall, I just enjoyed it. I gave it like 3.5 stars. It's worth your time and I don't regret reading it, but I just wish that I was more invested. So the next audiobook that I read was also a fantasy book, and that was the first in the Demon Cycle, which is The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett. I had really high hopes for this. It's basically a demon apocalypse where humanity is dying out and trying to fight off these demons in a fantasy setting, and it follows a bunch of different characters, one of them being Arlen, and Arlen's story is kind of an orphan farm boy to being this powerful creature that's maybe human, maybe not. And it was just such an interesting premise, but unfortunately there was a lot of sexism at the core of this book. Even though I understood what Peter V. Brett was trying to do in the brutality and setting up this world, it was kind of too obvious, it wasn't really subverted, and it just didn't really intrigue me. I wanted to DNF this, which means do not finish. It's basically just put the book down and not continue. But I was listening to the audiobook. It went by really quickly. I listened on 2 times speed. So I just thought I'll power through it and I can talk to Dave about it because he's read the entire series. So unfortunately, I did give this a 1 out of 5 stars. It's probably my lowest rated book this entire year. And I did film a book talk for this and I was angry, so do forgive me. It was just not what I expected it to be, unfortunately. I'm also, as you can probably guess from the 1 out of 5 star rating, I'm probably not going to be continuing the Demon Cycle series by Peter V. Brett. These are the next books I read and I absolutely love them, and that is A Closed and Common Orbit and Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers. These books are absolutely beautiful. They're adult sci-fi kind of space operas, and they follow anything from interspecies characters to AI to humans to exodons, and exodons are humans that have lived on ships for generations. I would recommend reading these in order, even though they're technically companion books. They happen to follow along in the same world, but just with different characters. So book 1 is The Long Way from a Small Angry Planet, and that the events at the end of that book directly correlate with A Closed Uncommon Orbit, even though A Closed Uncommon Orbit follows 2 minor characters from the first book. So I would recommend reading them in order. It makes a little bit more sense doing it that way, and it avoids a big spoiler at the end of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. But overall, I gave all of these 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely 100% recommend these. They're so beautiful and full of belonging and curiosity, and it's just a really interesting question of what humanity is and how we support each other. And Becky Chambers' writing is absolutely stunning, so I would highly recommend these. I ended up getting 50 pages into this arc of Grace and Fury, and I ended up not finishing it and just putting it back down. Not because it was necessarily a bad book at all. I just don't think I was enjoying myself. I didn't really connect with the 2 sisters at the heart of this story. The premise is really cool. It's a young adult fantasy book that's got Handmaid's Tale vibes and Hunger Games vibes, and it's about these 2 sisters, and in this world women are forbidden from reading, but one of the sisters knows how to read. So it's about her keeping her secret and the trials and tribulations these 2 sisters go through and how they try and stick together and support each other. So it's got an awesome sounding message, but I was just not interested in the writing. It just, I guess, wasn't for me. I find that young adult fantasy is a very big hit or a very big miss with me, and unfortunately this was just a miss. But I know a lot of people in the blogging community on Twitter and Instagram have absolutely been loving this, so I'm probably in the minority of DNFing this book. Next, I read the wonderful Restoration, which is the 3rd book in the Verity Fassbinder series. Verity is a main character in her 30s, and she's a private investigator, and she investigates weird crimes. Weird is kind of like the urban fantasy setup in this story. So the weird are characters and creatures that have supernatural abilities and are kind of sirens and vampires and creatures of the paranormal, I guess, and the crimes that Verity investigates are linked directly to these creatures. So the reason that Verity is such a good private investigator is because she's half human and half weird, and her half weird side gives her inhuman strength. So she's not afraid to go to places to rough people up to get information, but she's also, on the other end of that, a really vulnerable, emotional main character who's so loyal and so sassy, and she's just so fun to read from. So I definitely recommend this urban fantasy adult series if you're wanting a bit of fun, because Verity is such a brilliant narrator. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it, and I do remember laughing out loud at some of the lines. And then most recently, I actually finished 2 books this weekend at the time that we're filming. So the first one was an audiobook. I don't actually have the physical copy with me, but it's These Broken Stars by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. So These Broken Stars is a mix between a romance sci-fi book and a survival story on this abandoned planet. And I found it really kind of cute but cheesy, and I expected that going in. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it like 3.5 stars. At this stage, I'm not sure if I'm going to be continuing the series. I think I do own the physical books of the entire trilogy, and they're all companion novels, so this story wraps up in book 1, so I don't necessarily have to read on. Maybe I'll pick up the audiobooks down the track, but at the moment I just really enjoyed These Broken Stars. I would recommend if you enjoy sci-fi a lot and young adult, because it was very typically young adult and romancy and cute and fluffy. And lastly, I read Killer Tea by Robert Muchamore. Now, this guy has written one of my favourite series that I grew up with called the Cherub series, and it was about kid spies. So his writing is very familiar to me, and the beginning of it kind of read in a similar voice to the Cherub books. It was contemporary starting off, but it became dystopian sci-fi, which I really enjoyed. The premise basically is that in this world, there is gene technology that is readily available to everybody. And because of this availability of gene editing technology, there are certain things that occur in the book, like viruses, for example. Anyone can create a synthetic virus and unleash it on the world. So that's why the beginning starts off in this society that's kind of similar to our own, and then it devolves into this dystopian book where inflation means that an apple will cost you $300, and everything becomes urgent and desperate, and it becomes this kind of survival story. And so we follow both Charlie, who's a young girl, and Harry, who's this British guy who's moved over to the US. I did really enjoy this book. Obviously, like I said, the writing was very familiar to me already. I really enjoy Robert Muchamore's writing style. It's very descriptive and very characteristic, and I got quite invested into both Charlie and Harry as they grew apart and grew back together and tried to survive. It was really endearing, but the thing that I didn't expect, I think because the blurb suggests that it's going to be a dystopian from page 1, I was reading along and I was like 200 pages in and I was like, but where's all the survival and the gene editing technology and the killing people? And that didn't really happen until like the last third maybe. So if you're going to read this, be warned that it's not dystopian from page 1, but it's still highly enjoyable. I think I gave it a 3 or a 4 stars. I'm still undecided. I only finished it like yesterday, but it was a really fun book and I would definitely recommend if you like contemporary going into sci-fi dystopian. I think this is a great bridging book if you want to start reading outside of contemporary. And there you go, those were some of the books I had read recently and my thoughts on them. I'm actually just currently reading an arc of Mirage, which is a young adult book that's a sci-fi, and it's about this character named Amani, and something happens to her at the start and she's pulled out of what she knows and thrust into this world that she doesn't understand. It's by Sonia Dowd and it comes out on August 28th, so it will definitely be released by the time this video is live. So definitely go and check it out. I'm enjoying it so far. The tone of the book is really interesting and it has captured me from the first couple of pages, so I'm really enjoying it so far. I hope you enjoyed hearing about some of the things that I'd recently read. If you're interested in having a chat to me, I'll talk to you in the comments, but I've also got my Instagram, my Twitter and my Goodreads linked down below as well, so I'd love to chat to you on other platforms. Thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye!